Okay, I'm back, guys. Sorry about that. I got to pick up my wife from the airport soon. I had to take that call. All right, I got a couple questions here. Elsa says, hey, Bruce, I took one of your RMF courses. Great videos. Question, to be an ISO assessor, do you have to be a very technical person? Thank you. Okay, so an ISO assessor, there's many different kinds of assessors, and usually assessors are very deep in one or more disciplines. Do you have to be really technical? Yes and no. The reason why I say that is because it depends. It depends on what kind of assessor you are. Being honest here. So, for example, if you happen to be an assessor who assesses networks, you have to be super technical. I mean, you have to practically be a CCNP. Like, you have to be very technical. You really got to know all of the types of vulnerabilities of an iOS system, probably have to know multiple systems, not just Cisco, but Juniper and Palo Alto. Probably have to know some firewall stuff, IP chains, IP routing, because you have to know what to look for. And you also have to know how to use scanners. Like, you have to know how to read scanners. Like, you have to be super deep for that. Now, the reason why I say yes and no is because on the no side, you could be an assessor who looks at documentation. So now, typically assessors are kind of like jack of all trades. Like, they know what to look for with policy, and they know a little bit about scanning. So they usually know a little bit about each thing. But the best assessors are ones who are very deep in one or two areas, I've noticed. And there are assessors who are not super technical. And I've met them. I know this because I've been in this field for a long time, and I've known some who are not technical. And those ones usually are focused on policy. They know. Now, that said, they're very deep in risk management framework. They're very deep in, they've been through the whole process before. They know what to look for because they've done it. The process consists of getting an organization certified. So these are people who've done that before, and so they are a little bit technical in that you can't BS them on, or you probably could, but you'd have to really know what you're talking about on firewalls or on networking stuff or whatever. They're not super deep on that. Maybe they've never been a firewall administrator they don't know. They're not deep in that area. They're not deep in networking, but they are super deep in policies. They've written policies before. They've gotten organizations through assessments. They know standards. They know how risk models. They know those kinds of things. So yes and no, I would say. Now, to get to the assessor, to become an assessor, you have to have a lot of experience. Now, whether that's experience in being a cybersecurity person for years and years, or being a network engineer for years and years, typically these are people who have been around for a while. Now, I did know one guy who didn't have, my last job, just to kind of give you context, I did meet one assessor who didn't have a lot of experience, and it was the first time I'd seen it. So my last job, they hired a guy who had a bachelor's degree, and he had a Security Plus, and maybe a couple other certifications, but he wasn't very technical, I noticed. I know he wasn't technical because he would ask questions that I could tell you didn't understand what was going on. And we worked with a lot of technical people, very deep technical people, like a super deep firewall person and super deep networking people. And we had to work with them to create these documents. But this other coworker of mine, he wasn't technical, so he'd ask these weird questions, and then the technical team would come to me and ask me and say, hey, what did he mean by this? And I'm like, he probably didn't understand it, the difference between routable IPs and non-routable IPs, something like that. He would ask these questions that he should have known, had a basic understanding of this technical stuff, but he didn't. But this guy they'd hired him from, and I'm not trying to talk mess about this guy or anything. He was a smart guy. He was a very hard worker. He was a good guy. I'd work with him again, but he wasn't technical. He was coming from an assessor. He used to be an assessor. He was an assessor for a couple years, I think, but he wasn't technical. He was purely policy. And I've seen a couple guys like that in risk management framework who did not have a technical background, who only knew policy, who only knew risk management framework, who really knew how to do documentation, who are very hard workers and stuff. So it is possible. It's pretty rare because I haven't seen it very often. I personally haven't seen that. Doesn't mean it's not being done, because these days we need so many people that you're seeing a lot of weird stuff nowadays. So we need people. I would say that if you're trying to do risk management framework, the more you know technically, the more experience you can gather, the more you'll understand about the technology we are trying to protect. The more you understand, the better. Even if you're going to be purely documentation and that's your plan, the more you understand, even if you're let me just take it a step further. Even if you plan to do program management, which is managing programs, and they're not technical at all. Okay. Even if you're doing that and you're doing this for system engineering work or for IT work, you should try to understand what networking is. You should try to understand Linux. You should actually sit at the command line. You should actually learn as much as you can about the technology and the information that you're protecting. You should. So that's just my 2 cents, because I know a lot of people are trying to get into this because it's not super technical. They don't have to know, they don't have to be super deep in all this technical stuff. They don't have to be a hacker and all this stuff. And I appreciate that. I think that's cool that this field is opening up to where you're not having all these freaking brainiacs in here. But at the same time, you should know as much as you can. You should understand as much as possible so that you can better protect assets and information systems. Okay,